Traditional dialogue has been used in stage play for millennia, and in film since talkies began nearly 100 years ago, all leaving plenty of time for well-established formats to take root. But newer forms of communication like texts and instant messages, along with underrepresented non-verbal languages like American Sign Language, don't share these long histories. As stories have progressed to include these forms of communication, a number of approaches to their formatting have emerged, which gives you the freedom to choose the best technique to tell your story. When texts first started popping up in films and TV, they were usually written into the narrative description as if the camera would be pointed at the actual device. Arya looks down at her phone. A shiver runs up her spine as she reads, "Close on message. Arya. Maybe he fools around with students all the time. A lot of teachers do. Just ask your dad. A." While they're still often shot this way, they're now usually written with less of an emphasis on framing and subject, and more of an emphasis on the messages themselves. It's a text from Megan. Bringing food now. Was $25, okay? And there's a trend towards showing these messages superimposed over scenes. Text on screen. Till the next time, Mr. Holmes. But that's a decision that's usually best left to production. Molly's phone buzzes with a text. Hey. Molly grins. Diane notices. For one-off messages, the most common modern approach is to just ignore the actual framing of the shot and use the narrative description to introduce the form of communication, followed by a colon, and then the message itself. Emily reacts, then she texts Doug. So romantic. Wish you were here. The message is often emphasized with quotation marks, italics, bolding, or all caps. The two boys watch SpongeBob SquarePants on TV eating popcorn. Stephanie texts Emily. Should I give Nikki a bath? She hits send, waits. She fixates on her phone. No response. And the whole thing can be incorporated into a larger paragraph of description, on a line by itself, or even split so that the actual message is given its own line. If you need to portray a back and forth text conversation, you could just repeat any one of these methods for every new text. His BlackBerry buzzes on the nightstand. He reaches over to check it. It's a text message. Alex, can't fall asleep. Ryan texts back. Ryan, me too, just laying here. Or you could simplify things a bit further by only introducing the form of communication once, and then using a simple and consistent name-message format for each text in that conversation. We see on either side of the screen their text messages to one another as their teacher, Mr. Martin, blah blah blahs in the background. Kat, you want to go to McKay's party Friday? Jules, who's that? Kat, some football player. Jules, LOL, maybe. Speaking of names, it's not uncommon for people to add a contact under a silly name in their phone, or have some quirky username for IMs. And these can be a fun way to inject a bit of personality into characters and relationships in your script. She gets a text. It reads, bus rodent, still smiling, smiley face, drink tonight? But they don't always make it to the screen, and they can also be a bit confusing to read if you don't present things clearly in the description. Texts and IMs are also unique in that they often include acronyms, emojis, and improper grammar and spelling. On Kayla's screen, a text from Olivia. We just got here, XO smiley face. They can also include attachments like images. She stands there unsure. The man texts a picture, a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. All of which can add authenticity to your script. But not all writers like putting what is ostensibly dialogue into their description, and instead choose to incorporate texts and IMs into the dialogue format. Mickey hears vibrating and picks up her phone. Her ambient out eyes fixate on a text from Eric. Eric's text. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Let's talk. Meet at Bliss House tonight. 3294 Wilton. Miss you, Mickey. This could mean a character heading like Eric's text, or you could use a heading parenthetical with text or IM to keep the cue consistent. I'd also strongly recommend using quotes, italics, or some other emphasis for the dialogue itself, as an obvious reminder to the reader that the line isn't a normal spoken bit of dialogue. Without an established approach to text and instant messages, the most important factor in choosing your technique is readability. 2018's Searching created its own unique format for instant messaging, and a dozen other things. iMessage. No problem, but meant to ask. How did the final go today? Fine. Even if I bombed it. Mr. Lee wouldn't let me fail. But it's never an issue because the messages are presented clearly, consistently, and efficiently. And the same goes for another form of nonverbal dialogue you might want to use. Sign language. There's somewhere around 300 different sign languages used around the world, so you should probably try to specify which sign language is being used somewhere in your script. All following conversations in italics are signed and subtitled American Sign Language. This is where it is clear, Ruby's family is deaf. Ruby, what a dick. Just like text and other nonverbal communications, you can choose to keep sign language completely within the description. Eliza shows him the record and signs music. Or you can treat it as a foreign language like we covered in the previous video in this series. That might mean adding a simple dialogue parenthetical like in sign language. In sign language, the ball was out. Or adding a note explaining how and when sign language will be used. Note, Max doesn't speak. Her dialogue is signed and subtitled. She wears a hearing aid to help her read lips. When people speak to her, they must face her and/or sign. My teacher helped. Or mentioning it in the narrative description before the dialogue. Caesar touches the claw wounds across River's chest. River flinches in pain. Caesar signs. Think before you act, son. And just like with foreign languages, it's common to identify sign language dialogue with italics or bolding. But you sometimes see sign language indicated by less common emphases like brackets or underlining. This emphasis can also help seamlessly clarify when only parts of a character's speech are sign language. David is waiting outside. As they approach, David signs from afar. You're no longer my brother. You're just some git I once met. I'm sorry.
Carrie, this is David, my brother.
This is Carrie. An alternative approach unique to sign language dialogue is to write something like signing as a character heading parenthetical. Lee, signing. You cannot go down there. This is especially helpful in scripts where sign language dialogue is common but not constant, because it means we can skip the extra line for a dialogue parenthetical or a bit of narrative description. If you've watched the earlier videos in this series, you should now be a near master at writing back and forth dialogue between a few characters. But not every conversation is so straightforward, which is why you should check out this video to learn the best approaches to handling group dialogue and overlapping speech.